The revolution is here. A movement of people free to live, work, and choose. We won't tell you what to think. We just demand that you think for yourself. This is Kibbe on Liberty. Magno, how's it going?
I'm doing very well. Thank you for having me, Matt.
Yes,
it's strange talking to somebody that you've seen speaking so many times. So it's great being here.
And we've met up in Mexico City.
Yeah.
And we've been hanging out for 3 or 4 days talking about liberty and strategies throughout Latin America. And right now we're at the Atlas Liberty Forum in Mexico City. Our good friends at Atlas, and Brad Lips has been on the show, and probably other guys too. So you won something.
I did.
Yes.
I did win. I didn't expect it. And I'm even embarrassed to claim that I had anything to do with that, because when my team looked, they said, well, there's this prize, we should submit a project. I said, we don't have a case there. I don't think it's interesting enough. Let's not do it. They're like, no, let me do it. It's my job. Deborah, a member of my team, it's my job to submit stuff. Let me do it. So do it then. And then we were selected among the 3 finalists, and I was very happy already. We were celebrated because we could come to Mexico City and get a flight paid for. And we are happy already with that. And then we ended up winning, which is great. I mean, I'm very proud of my team, very proud of the work we did.
You have your girl right
and
here.
I'm very proud of my trophy, a beautiful trophy.
And this is, I'm going to script the title. This is the Templeton Freedom Prize. Is that right?
It is the Latin American Freedom Prize, which is like the semi-final for the final in New York in the Freedom Dinner, the World Freedom Dinner. This one is just Latin American. This is like the
and finally Brazil has taken the prize.
Finally, we have won something. Yesterday when they were giving me the trophy, I told somebody on stage, I'm a Brazilian libertarian. I'm not used to winning, so this is a new situation for me. Please,
that's like 2 levels of losing, right? Libertarian and Brazil.
Exactly. And Latin American libertarians don't win often. Brazilian libertarian, I guess, even less often because we have less success stories than other people in other.
And I want to get into that because I've been. You say that, but in my mind, as an American, I've heard fantastic stories over the last 10, 15 years about the growth of the liberty movement in Brazil, and I remember these large Students for Liberty rallies that I was told about in the Mises Institute. And I wanted to primarily talk to you about the state of the liberty movement in Brazil, your organization, maybe even the project you won the prize for. But let's start with you. What's your deal, and why should people watching this want to listen to you?
Well, I'm a normal person. I didn't have any political plans or anything, except I did like politics. But, my early 20s, I would identify as a leftist just because, in the university, the leftists were not homophobes. And they didn't like the military dictatorship. Brazil was a military dictatorship between 64 and 85. And the whole thing, even the censorship, I think more than the violence of dictatorship, the speech violence, the censorship on music. I remember being a child and getting records, my grandfather, and there would be some warnings there that some songs were forbidden to be executed in public radio, things like that. And I would ask people, why is that? Well, censorship from the dictatorship times.
This is fascinating because this is a typical thing that we're digging into at Free the People, the way that authoritarians and dictators go after musicians and artists, and it's always the same story because they're afraid of the freedom in on that album. Yeah,
of course. And some of those songs were politically neutral. Sometimes they had a swear word.
Yeah.
But what is up with that? You cannot have a swear word how does that threaten your crazy dictatorship? But it was just like a matter of the order, and that kind of bothered me when I was a teenager, as I think bothers every teenager. And then when I grew up, I found out the leftists were also for a strange order, and I didn't fit in there either. And that's how I stumbled upon libertarianism and those ideas and the free market. I totally could see that I didn't like socialism. I didn't think the socialist experiences, and since I liked politics, I was aware of the socialist experiments around the world, particularly in Europe. I didn't like that, but I just thought they were nicer crowds to hang out with. But then I found out, okay, well, there's this other group of people.
Yeah.
They are more reasonable in economic terms. They have a more, I don't know, I thought in terms of modern thinking. Mm-hmm. And they're also kind of accepting of other lifestyles. And, I found myself in there. And I was totally self-deprecating about the libertarian movement in Brazil and the liberal movement in Brazil, because it's true, we have had an incredible growth in the past 15 years. We are growing not only in numbers, but also in importance. We have a lot of good people in good, important positions. And I think we're making slowly but surely good progress in the country.
Talk about Livres, the origins and your organization. Yeah. Why was it created and what does it do?
There was always an issue. Politics was always an issue for us in Brazil, free market people. There is that old Mencken, I guess, quote that elections are an auction of stolen goods, or something like that, isn't it? And I think we traditionally would look at politics from that point of view. It's like, well, taxation is theft, so
it's
why
dirty.
It's dirty.
Yeah.
Why would we put our hands into it? And that was frustrating for me because I like politics. I wanted to do something about that. I was studying political science. And then slowly there were some people who wanted to do something on that regard, not necessarily politics itself, but public policy, something more applicable. And there was a conversation, okay, so what do we do? Do we start a new party or do we just join collectively an old party? Brazil has today 34 registered parties, which in itself, to me, is not a problem. For me, anyone should be able to create a political party and go try their luck. But what makes it complex is that we have about 20 in parliament, which makes everything very complicated.
Yeah, I have to say, and I'm sure you know all the downsides of having 30 plus parties, but I have to say the idea that in America that you would force people into one of two boxes is absurd because there's many different perspectives and places where people come from, and I think that the growth of independence in the U.S. is some indication that people are like, oh, hard left, hard right, I don't fit in there. So in some ways it'd be nice to have a niche party that maybe doesn't accomplish anything, but at least that's a home.
Exactly, and that was a conversation that a lot of us had at the time, and some people started trying to begin something new, start something new, and some other people thought maybe it would be a good idea to join a new party. And Livres was kind of it at that time. Some people got contacted by the family that owned a political party, and that's how it is, being honest.
Really?
Political parties in Brazil are owned because they are, political notaries.
Yeah.
You go there and you're certified, then you can run, because it is forbidden to be an independent candidate in Brazil. So you depend on that stamp, and that's what they do. They sell stamps, since obviously there are not 34 possible ideologies for politicians to.
So like a syntax or indulgences or something.
Exactly. And I don't want to dig into what deals are made for that, for that permission for you to run. But a lot of bad things go in there. And they called a few friends of mine and said, hey, we want to renew this party based on ideas. We like what you guys produce. It was a group of liberal guys who were producing public policy analysis. And they invited other friends, and they tried to start this renewal of this party.
Yeah.
And that went on for 2 years. And in which the party felt the promises, and we got what they said they would do. They would help us to switch the key, as we say, to turn the key to this renewal movement in a few states. And I think...
And what year is this?
This is 2016, 2017.
Okay. Yeah.
And by the end of 2017, Livres was controlling 13 out of 27 states. So the party in 13 out of 27 states. And then comes January 2018. 2018 is a general election year in Brazil. And we were starting to get ready for the election. We had a couple people who were ready to run. And we were bringing in members of parliament who wanted to switch to our party because they liked our ideas. They had seen us in social media, had seen us in the traditional media, because the party suddenly got a lot of attention. Because who are these guys? They are not afraid of saying we're liberals, we're pro free market, privatization, but we're also want to legalize marijuana. So it was like, okay, who are these guys? And we were bringing in new people. But then we heard that the president of the party, the owner, had been in conversations with Jair Bolsonaro, the guy who now is the president of Brazil, but at the time he was already leading the polls. And we knew him. He had been a congressman for 30 plus years. We knew he was not one of us, neither on economic terms, not on his social views. And we decided...
Is it fair to say he's a right-wing populist?
He's a right-wing populist. In a country where... institutions are weaker than in the United States, and political parties exert less pressure and give less structure or put less boundaries on what people can or not do, because it's a free-for-all. There are no structures, there are no political parties. So I used to read people comparing Bolsonaro to Trump, but just imagine Trump in a country that has weaker institutions and without the Republican Party. That we may have criticisms, but the Republican Party has a long history, governors, Congress people, it is an establishment party. Then that gives you some...
a platform and, not a completely ironclad ideology, but some sort of history there, and of course institutions that supposedly impose limits on politicians. Although I'd be a little skeptical in the last couple of years.
Yeah, but it does matter a little bit. You can argue, okay, today the Republican Party is Trump's party, but still there is some accumulation of knowledge there, of experience. And he's unhinged, so he can just do whatever, he can say that his election was a fraud. So, but you won. Still, it was so. And we knew him. We knew what he stood for, that he was against privatizing companies. Bolsonaro. That he was not a free market guy. And he was not a guy who saw society in a tolerant, a modern way that we believe we see. And we decided to leave the party. And we said, if he joins, we're going to leave. And he did join, and we did leave. He had imposed a very high political cost to our friends who were about to run.
Sure.
They had to switch parties, find a new party. But there was no way we could live with Bolsonaro.
This is kind of interesting and different, but perhaps similar to some of my personal history, because I was a Tea Party organizer, and the Tea Party, for all of its failures, elected Liberty Republicans like Rand Paul and Mike Lee and Justin Amash and Thomas Massie and a handful of others, and we thought in 2020 that was 2016 that was, as Time Magazine said, the libertarian moment. And I was doing a Rand Paul super PAC, and out of nowhere Trump shows up, and no one really takes him seriously until everybody had to take him seriously.
Until he started winning.
So it completely hijacked what I thought was a serious effort to put liberty back into the American conversation by getting one party at least to respect it, and poof, it's just gone. Gone.
And it's frustrating. And if you are just a party organizer, if you are just ideologue, it is frustrating. But imagine if you're a guy preparing to run for Congress. You're a young guy, libertarian guy. You're preparing yourself to run for your first election, and then you have to leave the party and find a new home, I don't know, 9 months before the election.
Yeah.
And not only that, the leader of the polls is coming to your party. So you have a choice of giving up on a few of your principles and take massive advantage of the fact that these guys come to your party. You just take a photo with him and get elected. That's what was happening.
Yeah.
And they left. And we didn't really know what to do with this group of people who were fairly organized and coherent in our ideology, in our worldview, and start anew. We didn't even know what to do. What are we going to be? Now there's a whole sector in the Brazilian non-profit sector of political movements, and that's what we ended up being.
Yeah.
Well, we're independent. We work with a lot of parties. So I said there are 34 parties in Brazil. I guess last time we checked, among our members, we had people in 12, 13 different parties. And, our point is we promote these ideas in politics, in public policy. And it doesn't matter what party you belong to or how you identify yourself. As long as you're willing to, put these ideas forward, we want to work with you.
So you went from explicit political party to a movement, perhaps, based on ideas and values and certain policies that you're promoting. It strikes me that I'm sort of burned out on politics in the U.S., but I also watch someone like Ron Paul use presidential politics as a cultural soapbox to talk about ideas and even name drop some economists that I love. And so you have millions of young people Googling who is Ludwig von Mises. So I have to be careful about not doing politics, because it is something that people pay attention to, and it obviously has consequences. But we think about getting upstream of politics so that by the time you get to choosing candidates, you have a community of people and a set of values that are pushing them to be better than they might otherwise be.
Yeah, and regardless of what we think of politics, that's how a lot of decisions are made. Unfortunately, I would much rather have more individuals make their own choices and have more power devolved to people. But that's the state of our societies today. And in Brazil in particular, the state is much bigger, much more present than in the United States. And we have to be part of it. If we are not, somebody else will. And I'm glad to say that a lot of us are putting their names forward. A lot of us are going into this crazy adventure. Think of it. Suddenly, a lot of people are swearing at you on your Instagram account.
Yeah.
One day you're just a guy taking pictures of your holidays and you're your girlfriend. And then the next day people are shouting at you in restaurants. So I have deep respect for people who go into politics. And I think they're making us proud. It's still a very new thing. There's still only a few of us, but they are doing a good job, and I'm very optimistic for this year's elections. This year we have national elections in Brazil, not only for president, but also for Congress. And I'm very confident that we will have a good result, and we will elect even more people like us to be in Congress next year.
So Bolsonaro won in 2018.
2018.
And when is he up for election again?
This November.
Okay, so this is, and so talk a little bit about his failures and successes and what's going to happen. Like, I don't know, I don't even know who he's running against. To start my explanation about Bolsonaro's time, I must say I'm very critical of him and his government. I don't think he's a good representative for a country as the chief of armed forces and our government and our state, as the head of our country. And as any politician, he has his failures and his successes. I think his disregard for democracy, and not in a libertarian way of, democracy is not the best system, but his appreciation of dictatorship that he never really had to hide. It's something that disgusts me. Does he govern as an authoritarian?
He would if he could.
Yeah.
He would if he could.
What limits that? I don't understand the political dynamics.
Well,
do you have a constitution that limits him?
Well, certainly, and power are divided in a way that the checks and balances have worked okay. In a way that the Supreme Court has even overstepped its original purposes. I would argue that they've been legislating. They're being far more politically active than I think they should be as a response to the threat they perceive in Bolsonaro. There is a lot of a speech game.
So they become activists too.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Since you have a president that speaks too much and acts in ways that you don't think is appropriate, and I certainly don't think is appropriate most of his actions, you get a Supreme Court that too active in political discourse and in political actions. And that generates a whole institutional crisis in the country, because you see two problems, and the two wrongs don't make a right. And it's tiring to see these over and over again. You see the Supreme Court say, why are you guys having an opinion on that? And you see the president's like, why are you saying that? And I mean, he has to talk to Congress. Given how political power is spread in Congress with 20 parties, it's not easy to control politicians over there. So anything requires a lot of negotiation.
Is his opposition from the hard left, or how much of it is your kind of guys? Is there
almost none of it?
So there's very little classical liberal.
Yeah, there are like 15.
So it's left, hard left versus would you call it socialist?
Yeah, I would call it 90s, 70s left.
Yeah.
It's not that they are Hugo Chavez, although a few of them are not shy about their sympathies for Hugo Chavez, but they're just old, economically conservative left. You know what I mean? They are stuck in the past. They are dreaming of Paris in 1968. They're dreaming of that time.
A lot of intervention, a lot of social engineering.
Yeah, let's make things right by writing laws and stopping rich people.
But not like Marxist ideologues.
Not really. I don't think they are sophisticated enough for that. It's not even like, they're much better than this. I just don't think they are sophisticated enough. They are short-sighted.
Yeah.
They just want to win the next election and maybe strike a deal here. The left was being in power in Brazil between 2003 2016, and they're involved in corruption with big companies too. It was not like, they want to do a revolution. They want to have some advantages here, get some money, get elected a few places with the help of billionaires. They had no problems with billionaires when they were in power. Now, of course, they have problems with billionaires. But this kind of left, it's not very ideological. Maybe on Twitter is very ideological, but they don't act politically in a very, very ideological
They're just
way.
taking care of themselves.
Yeah, mostly in their parties and their friends in business or in politics.
So what happens, because the thing from the outside, and this has happened in other countries in Latin America, where the hard left exploits that kind of chaos and abuse of power, and suddenly you're like, this guy's a Marxist.
Yeah.
What's going to happen in Brazil? Is there what is the alternative to Bolsonaro?
It's horribly sad that the alternative to Bolsonaro is former President Lula, who's still very popular in the country, probably more popular now than he was before, who just, spent 2 years in prison for corruption charges. He was not found innocent nor guilty. His trial was just voided. So he's free to run again, and he's leading the polls. He's the most credible threat to Bolsonaro. Bolsonaro is actually today, and we're typing this in early June, he is behind the polls. Of course, the state has a lot of power, so Bolsonaro has a lot of money to distribute, a lot of favors to distribute too, but so does Lula. He governed for 8 years, so people know him, and they know they can trust him to be a good distributor of favors.
Now, he's not a 1970s leftist. He's more.
He's far more complex than that.
Yeah.
He's intelligent enough to understand modern politics. He's a charming man. So when he goes abroad, he's dining with the president of France for the great head of states in Europe. He's cheered in universities, but he was not in prison for nothing. He was the president when there was a few massive corruption schemes going on in Brazil. He always said he never knew anything. Well, if there is a massive corruption scheme in your government and you don't know anything, you're either stupid or you're corrupt.
Yeah.
Just one of them. There is not a third alternative.
And you suggested he's not stupid.
I don't think he's stupid.
Yeah.
He's a very intelligent man, even intelligent enough to understand at some point that he needs to make a few concessions.
Yeah.
So in his first government, the country needed to balance the budget, or at least reduce the budget deficit, and he made some deep cuts. He brought in some good economists to put the country in shape, and once the economy was in shape, he just went crazy, spending like crazy. Elected his successor, who was Dilma Rousseff. He was just the greatest failure I've ever seen in Brazilian politics. She ended up being impeached. And that's in the end, the rejection to Lula and his party was so massive that a lot of intelligent people went on and voted for Bolsonaro, a guy who cheered our dictators, who had in his office in Congress the photos of our dictators. So that's, to me, that's humiliating.
Yeah, yeah.
We as a country are electing this person in 2018. We're electing these guys who's cheering the military dictators from the 70s. You know, that generals with big sunglasses, that old stupid stuff. And we elected him. That's embarrassing. But that was the state of the country. And unfortunately, this will probably be the state of the country this year, between the crazy, corrupt left and the crazy, probably also corrupt populist right. I mean, populists on the left, populists on the right.
So let's take a step back, because we were talking about this afternoon, and I didn't know the context of the optimism leading up to this sudden switcheroo in 2018. But talk about some of the different groups and how the liberty movement, the classical liberals, the libertarians, and by the way, Livre means basically free people, right?
Yeah. Frees. The frees. I would say that. The free.
But you guys all work together. Yeah.
And of course, I speak better of my generation and people who have been involved in the last 15 years. But, you know, going back to the 90s, there was a small network of institutions, I would say in 6, 7 different cities, mostly major cities. But that kind of went, and they were good people. They were translating like themselves, human action.
Yeah.
They would get the book and translate and publish it. But those institutes went on decline in the late 90s, mid-late 90s. My generation, I guess, we started getting active in the mid 2000s, so 2006, 2007. And it was like my story is very simple. A friend of mine went to FEE for a summer school at FEE, went back.
The Foundation for
Economic Education. Went back home with a few books, and we thought it was nice.
Yeah.
And then there was an essay competition, and they would send people to be interns at Cato. And my friend was like second place, and he went to intern at Cato and came back home with a lot of books again. I was like, wow, man, I think I like it. I think that's what we are. And we started talking like, let's do something about it. And we heard that Cato was starting a project in foreign languages. Cato had already El Cato, the Spanish-speaking project that was very successful, and they wanted to start projects in other languages. And this friend of mine started writing he wrote to me and asked me, do you know how to write a business proposal? Of course not. I I'm a social sciences student. I have no idea. Let's Google it. So we went Googling and we learned how to write a business proposal. We wrote a business proposal and sent it to Tom Palmer. And Tom Palmer said, I think it's good. We're going to help you start that. And in the beginning, we would just translate articles. We would write articles. We would try everything, podcasts, videos. There was no division of labor. And then we started with that website called Ordem Livre, free order. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, other people were starting too. And I think the most important thing at that time was that we were such a small movement that we all knew each other. So as time went by, there was some division of labor among these institutions. So SFL starts in Brazil in one of our summer schools. We started having summer schools in Brazil, and one of the projects that came out was, okay, let's just bring the idea of Students for Liberty from the United States to Brazil, and that's how they started. So we all know each other. So once the movement grows, and now we have thousands and thousands of people involved with it, it's much easier to coordinate our activities because the leadership of these organizations have known each other for a while. And we're all friends. We have our disagreements about everything. Obviously, we're libertarians. We love it. But they're all friendly disagreements, like sports disagreements. We disagree, but then, after the match is over, we go and have a beer, and we understand that we are in it together. And there was always this friendly underline in our discussions. And we know we are small, and we know we need to help each other. It doesn't work like this 100% of the time, but I would say 95% of the time, we are able to work together. And just here in this forum, we had people from, 10 different organizations. We all sat at the same table, talked, and we're all friends with each other.
They all seemed to be happy when you won the award.
Oh yeah, and when they called me to stage, I heard somebody on another table saying, "Well, he brought his supporters." I didn't bring my supporters, just people from the Brazilian movement, and there is this camaraderie among us, and I am sure that among us, among those who today are in leadership positions within the movement, this is something that we like to cultivate. And we tell the younger people who are arriving, take it easy on people on Instagram, on Twitter. Go and have a beer with them. These are nice people. We just disagree sometimes, but we're all in it together.
I hope American libertarians watching this listen to this dynamic, and I wonder if it comes from small p politics, because the libertarian joke I love to tell is that there's only one perfect libertarian, and that happens to be me. And everybody else is going to deviate from that perfection in some way.
The standard libertarianism.
Yeah, but if you're organizing grassroots and you're trying to reach people outside of our bubble, and God forbid if you're trying to organize a political coalition, by definition, you're going to disagree on all sorts of things. And the challenge is to find a couple really important things that everybody is fully committed to, core values that define what makes us different from the people that we're fighting against. But it's a little bit heartbreaking to me to watch American libertarians just kick the shit out of each other all the time, because I'm like, guys, there's really bad guys doing really bad things to our country, and you're spending all your time going after each other.
Yeah, and I'm a peaceful person. This is part of my personality. I don't like arguments. It's hard to argue with me because I give up. Fight with me is hard because I give up, and I just cannot stand it. It's like, have you guys looked outside? I am not your enemy. If you think I'm everything that's wrong with this country, you're wrong, because we agree on almost everything. And it's funny because I go and speak to student groups a lot. SFL Brazil, I'm famous in SFL Brazil because I never say no. And sometimes they do send me to very far places. Yeah. But to me, that's a pleasure, because I come from a time when nobody wanted to listen to us. And now there are 10 people in Amazonas, 5 hours by plane from São Paulo. I'm on it. Yes, I'm going. Because to me it's such an honor. I'm pleased. I wish I could just hug every one of them. And I have no time to argue with people if, the size of the state should be, 35%.
By the way, I'm going to use a metaphor here. So I'm going to call you the Libertarian Party. And I'm going to point out Students for Liberty. And I'm going to point out the Mises Institute in Brazil. And you guys all work together.
Yes.
Huh.
Yes.
This can be done.
Yes. Think of it as a big, it's not that we agree on everything, but it's just obvious to me, and I guess to a lot of us, that it makes no sense spending time arguing with each other. Maybe, of course, if we are here having an intellectual discussion, we can argue about, get a Rothbard book and we can argue about a few of his points. And I think it's valid to have that kind of intellectual conversation. But that's not what I do. What I do is look what's going through Congress, looking what's the public debate, and try to put forward a liberal, free market, tolerant society view.
I think about arguing about ideas and philosophy, and that last 1% is a lot of fun to do amongst the family. But if you think about the level of humility we should have in terms of how do we create a stronger social movement, how would we create political change, how would we create a shift in culture that turns on young people to these ideas? Anybody that says they have it figured out is bullshitting you, because we have a lot of work to do, and I think I sort of like competing strategies because that's sort of our philosophy, right? Let's have different people with different ideas go to the market and try to make a go of it. And if we all agreed instead, let's all put our eggs in one basket and do this one thing, I think that would be a disaster, and that's inconsistent with what we supposedly believe.
And as in your argument about the right, correct libertarianism, that's me. If everybody thought like me, if I expected everybody to be like me, everybody would probably look like me too. And that's not what we want, right? If we want a true, good...
That's kind of a nightmare.
Permanent... Yeah, of course. I would hate to talk to myself all the time. Although I like being alone, but, sometimes I like to talk to other people. We want a permanent group. We want permanent liberal representation in the Brazilian market of ideas. That's what we want. We want in 20 years to have people who are then 20 arguing in their universities about these ideas and the value of these ideas. So we need these ideas to be diverse and to be spoken of in different ways and be fought for in different ways. So I have deep respect for people who are in academia. I have deep respect for people who are running political parties, people who are running for elections, who are in the nonprofit sector, because I think we all have a contribution to give to these ideas and to the continuation of these ideas within the public debate. For us, it was a major step to exist. And if you asked me 10 years ago, what do you expect to be your generation's work for these ideas in Brazil? I would say to exist, to be reminded. When people would talk about some issue, they think, there's also the liberal perspective. Let's hear these guys too. And that's a massive step for us. That was a massive step for us. And we are there. We are there. We are part of the public conversation, even if just for them to hate us. Please hate us. But then, the press would come and say, well, we heard these guys. Let's hear you now.
You only get hate if you matter.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Nobody was writing articles on, writing op-eds in the biggest newspaper of the country if we are not writing ours too. And, I remember the first time I had an op-ed on a small local newspaper. It was the best day of my life. I was so happy. I was hugging everybody. I bought the newspaper and I was showing people. And now it's just like, well, the country's biggest newspaper has requested an op-ed, asked me kindly if I could write an op-ed. I'm like, oh no, I'm so tired.
Another one,
I was going to the bar. And that shows, you have people who were, one of the the greatest number of votes in their cities or in their states, and they are us, one of us.
Yeah.
And, these are massive steps, and we should recognize that. We should celebrate that. And I think that gives us a measure of where we can get in the next 10 years.
Yeah. So I perhaps like you could be very frustrated and even depressed about the state of our current situation, particularly over the last 2 years. We've lost so much ground to authoritarians. But I also believe adamantly that young people trying to figure out who they are, and they're looking at this sort of false dichotomy of like, oh, I got to go left authoritarian, but I don't like those guys. Oh, I got to go right authoritarian. And I got to believe that there's like a big middle lane for those of us that believe in liberty. So I'd be a short-term pessimist. Things sort of suck right now, but a long-term optimist. I think there's a huge opportunity, and we should be open-minded about how we tap into that massive marketplace.
And, the lesson of the last few years, if you go to a SFL conference, you have 1,000 young people there very passionate about those ideas.
You're speaking in
Brazil, but
Brazil,
also but in the States it's
Sure.
the same. SFL has conferences in Europe, in the States, in Brazil. I suppose the Brazilian chapter of SFL is still the biggest in the world. It's energizing. It shows that there is a path. But I understand those that right now are kind of reluctant to jump into it, because you need to develop this thicker skin to join the conversation right now, because you have authoritarians on both sides, you have populists on both sides. They all offer very easy solutions for very complex situations.
Yeah.
They're all willing to call you communists or fascists if you disagree with them. Regarding with whom you're disagreeing at this moment, you're going to be a communist or a fascist. And it's not for everyone to, support that, to take that and, carry on. I'm very glad that we have as many teenagers as we do, or as many 20-something people who want to be part of it. But I know that it's very hard, and nobody should be expected to take somebody shouting fascist to your face and carry on. But I do believe that our job, those of us who are a bit older now, is that say, well, don't worry, we'll take the hit, and we hope that you guys will have a better time next time.
Teach people to be happy warriors, and be a little bit thick-skinned about those sorts of attacks that are so ridiculous, because again, it's an indication that you matter in the conversation. If they're so desperate, they're gonna call you. And typically, like I don't ever get called a socialist, but on social media, someone will call me a fascist. I'm like, do you have any idea what that means?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Do you know me?
Yeah.
People have called me a Lula supporter, and they have called me a Bolsonaro supporter.
Yeah.
And I don't care anymore, because you just need to read 2 or 3 of my tweets and you know that I'm neither of them. But I don't care anymore, and I think that's actually good, that now you're thinking that I'm able to decide elections, that we, the Liberty Movement, are able to be decisive in a presidential election that has 100 million electors.
Yeah.
That you're thinking that it was because of me that Bolsonaro got elected. It is because that I promote free market ideas, that Bolsonaro, who promoted free market ideas in his campaign, got elected. So if he thinks free market ideas are good ideas, and I don't think he does think, but he did pretend for a while. So I am just like him, because I also happen to believe that. And the same with Lula. I don't know if Lula says, oh, we should respect people in the street and the police shouldn't kill people, and I say the police shouldn't kill people, I am a communist and I'm a Lula supporter, because no, I'm just a liberal guy. And if you would go looking for what we think about it, we think the state power should be limited, including the police and including the power of the president. And we like free markets, and regardless of who is the president, we will like free markets in 2023 too. So, but it's good. It's good to matter.
The new radicalism is respect for humans, and possibly cooperation and mutual respect. We're running out of time, but I have to, before we talk about your organization, I have to give a shout out to my friend Carlos Lunas.
Which is...
And he produces a mezcal in Mexico City. You drink mezcal. Rompe Corazon, which means heartbreaker. That's the extent of my Spanish. It's right there.
Mine doesn't go very further than that, unfortunately.
My Spanish is better than my Portuguese, so gird yourself. But how would people find you and find Livre? And I assume a lot of it is in Portuguese, right?
Yeah, I think we have a pamphlet in English, but all of it, it's in Portuguese. Hopefully soon we're gonna have enough people in my team, so we're gonna have
Google Translate's not so bad, actually.
Google Translate is actually okay. People can find us on social media. We're very active there on every social media. It's Eu Sou Livres. Not the best, easier way to go about it. But if you Google my name is Magno Karl, Magno Karl. You'll find Livres very easily. And we are proud of the work we've been doing, proud of the prize we got here. And I'm really happy to be invited to be in your podcast and this conversation, because to me, this is like, okay, I'm on the next step now. I wrote to my friends back in Brazil, I'm going to have a conversation, Matt Kibbe. And I'm really, really glad to be here and drinking mezcal with you.
Well, cheers.
Cheers, man.
How do you say cheers in Portuguese?
Saúde.
Okay.
Saúde.
I'm not going to try to say it back.
Come on, it's easy. Saúde.
Saúde. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed that show, make sure that you like and subscribe. Click the little bell so that you get notifications. And if you consume this via podcast, go wherever you want to go. We're everywhere. Kibbe on Liberty. The revolution starts now.